I'm Robert Saltzman, author of The 10,000 Things, and my guest today is Jez Alborough. Jez is an artist who created a series of children's books that are beloved by parents and children alike, and that have sold millions of copies. Jez is also someone who went through a rather dramatic awakening and has written 2 books about his understanding from that perspective. I haven't read the books, but here's a brief passage Jez sent me from his 2019 book, The Infinite Journey. It seems that the general image of someone who's enlightened is a person who's reached a level of understanding that makes them almost superhuman. It's as if they have special powers and aren't subject to the same laws as normal people like us. This belief causes no end of obfuscation and misunderstanding. For a start, it suggests that this sort of freedom can't happen to you. It's exclusive to some divinely appointed superhuman breed. The word enlightenment has come to refer to an idea of human perfection. Waking up has nothing to do with being superhuman, special, or extraordinary. It's about being fully human. What does it mean to be human? One of the essential characteristics of being human is our capacity to feel. The aloof, detached, superhuman idea of what enlightenment looks like is nothing more than a projection which is upheld by anyone who has an investment in it. That could be a seeker or their teacher. Now, if you know my work at all, this is an idea I've expressed often myself, so I look forward very much to hearing more from Jez about it. I became aware that he has had some wonderful experiences in life. He attended art school and has created a series of children's books, as I mentioned, based on his drawings and the text that he also writes. And I guess I'd like to ask him about that first. So, Jez, please tell us how you got started.
Drawing and making up stories was something I was drawn to from a very early age. It just seemed to be as natural as breathing for me. And that interest was fed by comics, where I saw characters with speech bubbles. And it was a way of expressing thoughts and speech and story, putting it into frames and dividing time up in that way was very appealing to me. And I think I learned a language from those comics. So I went out into the world and I found the only place to use what I was interested in, what I could do, was children's picture books, because it's about story writing and drawing. So I, after a while trying to do illustrations for magazines, which didn't go very well, I found my place. There's a publisher here called Walker Books, and the man who owned the publishing company is called Sebastian Walker. He died in the 80s from AIDS, very sadly, but he was a real visionary. He was one of those guys, you know, who was like a Steve Jobs in the picture book world. He saw talent, and he was willing to put money behind it and nurture it. And I'm always grateful to him, because it seems now that doesn't really seem to happen so much. Everything's give it now. How much have you sold? What was your last book like? How many sales did it get? And these days, back then, I had 7 years where I published books, but none of them sold very well. Until 92, I think, when my first big seller happened.
Well, that must have been really exciting when the first book took off and you found you could make a living that way.
Yeah, it was a feeling of being at home at that time. This is what I'm meant to be doing. So yeah, it was really exciting. Yeah.
So what about your 2 recent books that are about awakening? Can you say something about those?
Yes. So because I write, it was very natural for me to want to express my experience in this area. And for a long time, I've written only for children's minds, which is a love. You are tuning into innocence, really. And you're breaking down life into bite-sized pieces for these young minds and helping them to learn about the world and feelings. And so it's a really beautiful job. But of course, not of course, but for me, as a writer, I felt limited in the end. I knew one day I wanted to use my writing skills for writing for adults. And when what happened to me, the time seemed to have arrived. And it was one of those feelings like, this is something I've got to do before I die. So I did it.
So what is it that happened to you? That you wanted to express in those books? How did that occur?
Where to begin? Okay, so in my life, I had two streams, I would say. One was fed by my character. And by my character, I mean my talents, my individuality, my joy, and my picture books. And that whole world really was an expression of that. And there's this theme for what I would call, and we're going to get onto this, obviously, personality. So just going to read you a quick quote, because from Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff said, kill your personality, the false personality, the false thing which we think is us. It has to die so that individuality may grow. Now, I didn't know that Gurdjieff talked about personality in this way, but for me, the understanding that happened to me was very clearly about identifying and disidentifying from what I call my personality. So in order to tell you a bit more what I mean by personality, for me, that means it's the, he would call it the false self, the sense of self that grows in relation to our childhood experiences and for what I would call the loss of our natural state. So I want to make clear, this is nothing against the idea of having a self or a sense of individuality. In fact, it's a celebration of it. But that individuality that I'm talking about is for me expressed in what I call the character, whereas the personality is the part that is, you know, there's so many different expressions of it, but, you know, it can be the cartoon expression of it is a big ego. Someone who needs to show off to make themselves look great all the time. The inverse of that, of course, is low self-esteem and somebody who has a kind of lack of self-love and is down on themselves. So the personality encompasses all those personality traits. It encompasses emotions. It encompasses, which I differ from feelings, which we can get back to. It encompasses neurosis, excess worry, and over-identification with the mind, overthinking, all these sort of things that cause what I call personality suffering, to distinguish it from normal human suffering, which is part of human life and nobody escapes from. So my contention is that there is a kind of suffering that is optional once this is found.
I think you and I agree on that. There's some essential character that seems to be part of each person. And in a fortunate life such as yours, it gets to express itself fully. And then even though the personality, the self-protective personality is there, the expression of character is so much more robust that the personality does not really seem important. That's my understanding of what you're saying. And in other cases, the personality may take control, and so the character never really gets to be fully expressed because there's no self-esteem or or you have a show off egomaniac. Is that the idea? Is that, do I have it?
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess I'm going further than that. And I'm saying that everybody is living, most people are living thinking that they are this personality. And they're not aware that it is just an identification with something which is which has the personality creates its own dream world, its own world. Now I know there's a talk out there of all of life's a dream, and now I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is the personality creates its own dream based on its beliefs and its emotions. So to try and give you an example of that, I think we talked last time, perhaps we took the case of someone with anorexia who believes that they're fat, even though they're not. You know, objectively, anyone can see that they're not. But in their heads and in their belief, they are fat. This is a bad thing. And that belief creates much suffering and suppression of the character in that person's life. So that is a kind of an more extreme example. But my contention is that everybody, as long as there is identification with personality, that dream of personality is being created and lived until it's been penetrated. So when we talk about this is it, and everything you talk about so beautifully, there is a readiness that needs to be there in order to perceive that.